Welcome to CS Week Marketplace, third Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern webinar series. CS Week Marketplace offers fresh perspectives and strategies presented monthly by knowledge specialists from the Conference 38 Platinum and Gold sponsors. I am John Sild and I'm with CS Week and I'll be your moderator today. CS Week in Conference 39 will be held from April 27 through May 1st, 2015 at the Charlotte Convention Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. This program will be recorded and available for playback, as are our other archive presentations found under the Educational Venues third Tuesday link on our website. Today's program is The Power of Behavioral Design presented by Opower. Attendees are encouraged to upload questions in the Q&A panel as they arise. However, all questions will be held until after the presentation for the Q&A segment. Please address your questions to the all icon and not just to the speaker. We are pleased to have with us Deena Rosen with Opower today. Deena leads the user experience team at Opower and is responsible for the entire suite of Opower products. She received her Master's of Science in Product Design from Stanford University and her computer science degree from Duke University. I want to welcome Deena and turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I'm glad that you could join us today. And today I'm going to talk to you about behavioral design at Opower. And this is our approach to designing for energy customers. What I'm going to start out with is a brief overview of behavioral science. So behavioral science is based on a view of human behavior that is different than the standard economic view. And if you think about the standard view, it says that we are all very rational people. We make all of our decisions very cognitively and deliberately, and we're paying close attention to all of the decisions we make. In reality, though, things don't function quite that way. The behavioral view of the world says that we are swayed by a multitude of factors, which could be emotional or social, and that many of the decisions we make are made automatically based on top-of-mind thoughts. This is required, actually, for us to survive in this type of environment that we live in where we're getting so much information at all times. If we didn't have mental models and shortcuts that helped us figure out how to behave, it would take a long time to process life. And so we take these shortcuts, and this doesn't make us irrational, and it doesn't make us stupid, it just makes us human. I'm going to go through an example of what I mean. So this is an example of a soup sale in a grocery store. A grocery store wanted to sell a lot of soup, and so they decided to have a sale, and they posted a sign that said, soup for sale, 75 cents off. They measured the amount of soup that people bought, and they found that on average, with the sale, people bought about 3.5 cans of soup. So they wanted to figure out if they could do an experiment to impact people's purchasing decisions. They changed the sign slightly. So it still said soup for sale, 75 cents off, but now they added these words, 10-can limit. And if you think about it for a moment, think about how that might impact people's purchasing decisions. What happened was, as you may have guessed, is that the number of cans of soup that people bought went up. It went up to an average of 7 cans. And if you think back at the standard view of the world, in the standard view of the world, a 10-can limit should really have no impact at all at the soup you're about to buy. Because if generally people buy around 3 cans of soup, having a 10-can limit shouldn't impact that. 3 is way under 10. But in reality, this 10-can limit is serving as a trigger that changes the way you decide in various ways. In one way, it's letting you know that there's the notion of scarcity. If there's a limit of soup, it may signal to you that we are running out, and this is something that you need to buy. The number 10 itself also serves as an anchor. Even just seeing a number, even if it's unrelated to the purchase you're about to make, will impact what you do. And so if we understand all of these techniques and shortcuts that we have and how they impact us, we can design our products to drive towards certain outcomes. And that's what behavioral design is. Behavioral design is a design of systems and experiences that nudge people to change certain behaviors. An example is on the screen here. You see that this is a trash can that's labeled with recycle and trash. And if you notice the change of that one word from trash to landfill, this one word might have an impact on how you would act when you're about to throw something away. And that's behavioral design. It's designing this product, this trash can, to take advantage of what we know about human behavior and how we can nudge your actions. At Opower, we design to impact energy outcomes. We did not invent behavioral design. It's something that exists in the design world and is something that a lot of companies and industries are using right now to help drive the outcomes that they want. At Opower, though, we have become experts in behavioral design for energy users. And on the screen here, you see examples of outcomes that we've designed for. Helping people use less energy at home, using energy at different times of day, making decisions between different rate plans. And this is just an example. And the way we do this is through a design approach that I'm going to talk through now. The rest of this talk, I'll be going through our design principles, there are 5 of them, and giving you examples of how we put them into practice. So we have 5 principles. You can see them on the screen here. And these are principles that we developed over the past several years based on working with the utility industry and all of our partners and talking to hundreds of energy customers all around the world. And we've condensed our learning into these 5 main principles that we can put into practice, and hopefully they'll be interesting to you as well. So the first principle is design for how people actually behave. This one is really about the behavioral science. It's important because if our goal is to change human behavior, we need to understand how it works. And even though we like to think that we're living in this standard view of the world where we're all acting rationally, the truth of the matter is that we are living in this behavioral view. And it makes us more predictable than we may like to think. And we can take advantage of that and build it into our design. So how we do that more practically is, as designers, we look at the key action points that we're asking users to take. And in any of these 3 action points, we're able to apply a host of behavioral science techniques. So anytime we're trying to get a user's attention or motivate them to do something, anytime we're trying to help somebody make a decision or help them follow through with an action that they already intend to take, these are great opportunities for us to infuse behavioral triggers. And I'll go through 2 examples of behavioral science techniques, even though there are many more. So the first one I'll talk about is social norms. Social norms are a great way to get somebody's attention or motivate them to do something differently. A social norm is comparing you to other people who are like you. And it works because we don't like to be out of the norm. And it works better than we may like to think that it would work, which is an interesting thing about behavioral science. So what you see on the screen here is a 3-bar graph comparing you to your neighbors in terms of energy use. And this is something that Opower is very well known for. So if you out there listening know of Opower, you've probably seen this before. When people get this type of information, they may be thinking about their energy use for the very first time, where they never have before, because this information is so great at getting someone's attention. But that's not the only place where we can use social norms, and we can use social proof in various other places throughout our products. So you can see that at the top right, we are showing people how many people in their area are participating in certain energy efficiency tips. There's a testimonial on the bottom there with a customer talking about different ways that they are saving energy with their family. And there are different data displays as well on here where we're using this social comparison. So social proof and social norms are all powerful ways for you to get somebody's attention. A second example is commitments. If you're trying to drive a user towards a certain action and you want them to follow through, asking them to make a commitment to that action has a great impact. So if we commit to a goal, we're more likely to honor it because now it has become part of our self-image. Some examples that we have done throughout Opower products are asking people to commit to energy efficiency tips or commit to saving a certain amount of energy. And this works even if somebody has just clicked something on the internet, it is still a form of commitment. Scientists have found that making a commitment in writing is the most powerful, but any small step we can take to get someone to commit to an action will have an impact. Social proof and commitments are two examples. You can see a few more listed here. This really could be a whole separate webinar in itself. So I'll just leave it here, and if you have questions about any of the rest of these examples, feel free to submit to the question panel. And I'll move along to the second design principle, which is assume people don't care. So many of you may have heard the Accenture statistic that the average person thinks about their energy use for only 9 minutes a year. If you haven't heard that before, it's one worth remembering because it's pretty shocking, especially to those of us in the utility industry, because we are thinking about energy use way more than 9 minutes a year and probably multiple hours every day. But this is something that we have to remind ourselves often at Opower, because if we are designing products for people who are not who are not as engaged as we are, we have to design things differently. We need to assume what I call the burden of relevance, boring until proven otherwise. And we have a lot of tactics that we can use to do this. So one is understanding that people have very limited attention spans. They're not choosing, for the most part, they're not choosing to receive the information that we're giving them. It's coming along with lots of other information in their lives. So we need to make sure that whatever we're telling people is relevant and personal. So some of the tactics we use are always pairing data with insight, never just showing people raw data or charts and graphs without giving them some interpretation of why it's meaningful. Exposing personalization, so letting people know if something has been chosen especially for them, it makes it more relevant to them. And then lastly, using familiar mental models like bar charts and line graphs, things where people don't really have to work to understand because they're already familiar with that type of display. And you can see an example on the right here is a typical utility bill, and you can see that a typical utility bill doesn't really follow any of these principles. And as such, it doesn't end up being very engaging or motivating. In contrast, here is an example from one of our email communications that we send out at Opower where we're letting people know as the summer is beginning what they typically have used in the past on cooling and how this has a big impact on their energy use. And you can see that it's a quite different way of engaging and motivating someone than the standard utility bill. Another example of how we can design for people who are not typically engaged is to elicit emotion. This is an example from one of our communications to small and medium businesses where we're trying to educate them about their energy use in the effort to get them to save. You can see that we are comparing business owners, and in this case it's the owner of a restaurant, and we're comparing this owner to similar restaurants in the area. What we found was that changing this one word, similar, to competitor had a big impact on eliciting emotion from people. In competitive markets, such as restaurants or retail, the word competitor itself is a marker and a shortcut to someone that they have to pay attention. So I'll move on to the third principle, which is always lead to action. So why is this one important? This is important because people have great intentions, but it's so easy for the things that we want to do to get lost. And if our intent as designers is to move you to action, we need to make that action for you as easy as we possibly can. And that involves understanding all of the potential barriers that may come between you and that action, and then trying to proactively address them. So I'll give you an example here. This is an example of low-flow shower heads. So if we want our population to install a low-flow shower head, we need to think about what does that action entail. And there are two main steps. A user would have to purchase the shower head and install it. So it seems pretty simple, but if you break down those tasks into all of their subtasks, you see there's a lot more steps that someone needs to take. To buy a shower head, someone has to figure out which store to go to and remember to go to the store. Once they're at the store, there's a whole shelf full of shower heads. They need to select the particular model and they need to be able to afford it. And once they've bought it, they need to bring it home. They need to remember to install it. They need to know how to install it. They need to have the tools to install it. So all of these subtasks are potential drop-off points that will prevent the person from completing the action. And so on our end, it's our responsibility to try and address all of those drop-off points proactively. And so there are things that we can do. We can use reviews to help people choose stores or choose specific models. We can use reminders to help people remember to do things, give them coupons to help them afford, make sure that they have the correct guides on how to do something. But in this particular case, there's even another barrier that we haven't mentioned yet, and that is the motivation to take this action in the first place. And a common question that people have about low-flow shower heads is this going to affect my comfort? This is important to realize because if we don't address this barrier first, we won't even get to any of the rest of the subtasks that are part of this journey. So one way to address this barrier of desire is to use a testimonial. And apology that there's a little bit of overlap on the slide, but a testimonial of someone trusted letting the person know that a low-flow shower head will not impact comfort and will in fact save money seems like a key barrier to address before even needing to go down the route of the others. An example of a specific way we've done this at Opower is around the action of adjusting thermostats before you leave the house. So when you break down the barriers for this action, they typically fall under these three categories of motivation, education, and just remembering to do it. So some people might not realize that this could save them a lot of money. They might have some myths around how thermostats work and that it might be inefficient to turn something off and then have to turn it back on when you get home. So if you're able to tackle all of that through education, there's still this issue of memory, which is when someone's leaving the house, are they going to remember to do this? That's a little harder to reach people at that exact moment. What we've done at Opower is we created door hangers that people can hang on their doors so that at that moment when they're leaving the house, the trigger is right there for them. We've found this to be very successful. We've run this program as a test in 9 utilities. In 8 of the 9 utilities, it drove a significant lift in energy efficiency. And now this is something we just do as a best practice. So the fourth principle we have is to aim for a long-term relationship. This is important because we're not trying to drive customers to do one specific thing. We're trying to adjust habits and behavior over time. And so what we do at Opower is really enhance the existing relationship between utility companies and their customers. If you think about political campaigns, this is an example of in contrast to us. So in political campaigns, all of us in the U.S. get a ton of phone calls, direct mail, all around campaign times, emails, trying to drive us to vote or to vote in a certain way. And the organizers of these campaigns, they don't really care that this is very annoying to us. And it is quite annoying, as I'm sure many of you can attest to. They don't care because they really just want you to vote on this one day, and if they get you to do that, it doesn't matter that you are annoyed or that the relationship between them and you is strained, because they're not really going to bother you again for another 4 years. We don't have that luxury in the energy world because we do have this long-term relationship with people that we need to maintain. So we really need to strike this balance between being impactful and motivating and also being empowering and encouraging and helping people feel like there's a two-way conversation. And so this is one of the ways that we do this. A couple examples of how we do it is to enable this two-way conversation so people are not feeling like information is just being thrown out to them, but that they have a say in how things are going. Whenever we show people a normative comparison, like we talked about earlier, where we're comparing them to other similar people, we always give them the opportunity to improve this comparison by giving us more information or just at least confirming that this comparison is fair and correct. We also proactively ask people for feedback. And so the example below is a screen that pops up after you've used our thermostat application for 4 times. We will ask you how things are going. Our last principle is build for everyone who receives a utility bill. So probably all of you listening to this webinar know very well that energy customers are not a tidy, well-defined user group. We have about 35% of people in the U.S. are renters, meaning that they don't have complete control over the building that they live in. About 30% of people we have email addresses for as an average for different utilities that we work with. But the current state of affairs is that we're only able to reach 30% of these people through digital channels. And then there's also accessibility. There's 8% of men in the U.S. who are colorblind and who can't differentiate charts and graphs based on color alone. So this is a pretty broad population of people that we need to design for when we're dealing with this group. And one of the ways that we do that is to really understand users and channels and how to best use and design for the various channels at our disposal. Digital, email, and mobile and paper are quite different mediums, and they're different types of information are suited better to specific channels, and understanding what types of information need to be more timely or could be sent via paper is important too. And so at Opower, we've had to become experts in these various ways of communicating. And we also build a platform that's flexible enough to be able to show different messages to different sets of people. So this is an example here on the screen of a promotion, a marketing promotion to take a home audit. And you can see that they look quite different visually, but they're both trying to drive the same outcome. The example on the top is sent to people who are part of a green environmental segment. And you can see that there's the color green, a green leaf, and it's focused more on empowering the person to make changes to their house and save energy. The example below is sent to people who are part of a skeptics segment and who may be more financially motivated and less environmentally driven. And you can see that instead of focusing on environmental impact, we are focusing on wasting energy in your house and a more practical message. So those are our 5 principles of behavioral design, and I hope that that was interesting to all of you, and I'm looking forward to any questions that you may have.
Okay, John, if you're okay with it, I'll go ahead and ask a couple questions.
Absolutely, go ahead. Okay,
great. So the first one for Deena is how do you evaluate the effectiveness of your efforts?
That's a great question. So in terms of the outcomes we're trying to drive, a lot of them can be measured through people's energy use. So we have a fairly extensive MMV process here at Opower where we're sending out communications to a test group, and we have a control group. And so we're measuring the impact of energy use based on who's receiving which communications. And that was the example that I showed you earlier about the door hangers. When I mentioned that we tested that, there was a test and control group. The test group received the door hangers, the control group did not, and that's how we can measure the impact. We also measure impact qualitatively. Every time we launch a new product, we will do evaluative research when it's complete and talk to people, do a lot of in-person interviews, video interviews, phone calls, just to get a sense of why the data and the results are the way they are so that we can continue to improve our products over time.
Great. Okay, so the next one, can you speak to your process for coming up with these design principles?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So the process of creating design principles, it's a fairly subjective one. It's a very common thing for companies to do. You can find Google's design principles online or Facebook's design principles. It's an important thing to do to help align the team on approach and let everyone externally internally and externally know what your company is about and how you approach designing your product. But it is a subjective process. And how we did it at Opower was we first looked at all of the design principles out there in the world to make sure we knew which we felt were successful in terms of being in a format that could impact design decisions and be inspiring to people. We then looked at everything about Opower and designing for energy customers that was unique, where we felt like these were parts of our design challenge that were different than designing for anywhere else. And you combine these parts of your company that are unique with best practices in user-centered design, and it's a bit of a mapping exercise where there's lots of people in the room and lots of Post-it notes, lots of whiteboarding, but coming up with themes where you feel that each one can stand on its own, but can't really live without the others as well. So this is actually our second round of design principles, and they've been really powerful for us at Opower and inspirational for other industries too. So that was one of the more surprising things, is that we find that people are able to use these in their own organizations.
Great. I think that really speaks well to this next question. How can people learn more about behavioral design and behavioral science?
Yeah, sure. It's fairly easy these days to learn about these things, which is great news for all of us, because it's such a hot topic in the design world, but also in just the general world. When you read books like Nudge or Thinking Fast and Slow, a lot of behavioral economists and behavioral scientists are putting out their work in very accessible formats. What we do at Opower is we have collected a series of resources that we train everyone on. There are some free online courses that we have everyone take. One of them is Dan Ariely's course on Coursera. It's quite good. Reading books is great. We've all read Influence Here, which is by Dr. Robert Cialdini, who's one of the scientists on our board here at Opower. So I think reading books, taking an online course, and then just starting to try and put it into practice on your team. Having your team either take the same course or read the same book as you at the same time, and having lunch clubs and discussing techniques, we found that to be a really great way at Opower to start to infuse this thinking into our everyday process.
Okay, great. And then just one last question. Can you list some examples of activities that people at utilities can start to incorporate into their work today?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to go back to a slide here, see if I can find it. But when at a utility, if you are trying to design a program or trying to drive people towards a certain outcome, I would say thinking about these 3 key action points and thinking about, are we trying to get someone's attention, help them make a decision, or help them follow through? And if you are, think about how you might be able to incorporate behavioral design to help drive that outcome. I would also say that coming up with your own design principles as a team is a really great way to make sure that everyone has this at top of mind, and you can start to infuse it more into your own design process.
Great. So I think those are all the questions from our end.
Okay, very good. Ladies, excellent presentation. Very informative and, again, enlightening on all these topics. So want to thank you again for your time and your presentation. Should any of our attendees have a question that might arise, please contact Lisa Collins with the CS Week office, and we will definitely forward it to Deena, or Deena, pardon me. We'll forward it to her, and we can get you an answer. At this time, we want to thank everyone for attending. We want to thank our presenter, Deena, and we thank you for being with us today. This concludes our webinar.